Welcome everybody back to another training, learning, and development community event. We've got day 3. It's Wednesday of an incredible week so far. Yesterday and the day before were absolutely amazing. And, I was thinking about it last night. If pretty much this week, if you were just thinking about getting into L&D, you were like a teacher or coming from another sort of career path and wanting to check out L&D and registering to this event to see like whether or not it's right for you, you will pretty much know by the end of this week whether or not L&D is the right direction, because there is so much going on, and we've got between the sessions and the virtual tables, you should be making lots of connections and getting a lot of questions answered. So I hope that you're enjoying this event so far. We've got over 700 people registered. There are more free tickets available. I just added a bunch more, so feel free to keep sharing out there and letting people know that that this event is taking place. And with that, it's my honor and privilege to introduce our next speaker, Sara Stevick, who has an absolutely incredible organization that she is the founder of and the creative program director of, Teaching a Path to Learning and Development. And let's see, that is at teachlearndev.org, right?
Sure is. Good old TPLD. We're here to help anybody, though. So if you're coming in from, I don't know, aeroscience or whatever, come on in. We take everything. Yeah, we take everything.
Sara is absolutely amazing. I mean, I've just admired her from afar, just watching what she does. And of course, as soon as this event started getting planned, I think it was Kayleen again was one of the first people like, Sara Stevick, we have to have her on. So, so glad that you're here to do this one, Sara. And let's see, what else? You were also a learning and development specialist, strategist, and technologist. And overall, an absolutely awesome person from what I've been told from many people. And with that, I'm going to let you just take it away.
Oh, thank you, Louise. That was very kind. Hey, everyone. Welcome. I'm super excited to see everybody here and interact. And I would love to just see in the chat, like, hey, where are you coming from? Why are you joining? Are you from education? All that stuff. It's going to be a very casual session here today. So I might bring people up on stage. Would love to have you raise your hand. Good morning to all the people who are in the morning time. I guess I'm technically still morning time. It's 11 here in Virginia, where I hail from. See a lot of people from different parts of the world: South Africa, Texas, Florida, Vancouver. Welcome. So Louise kind of teed it up real well for me. So just a little bit about me. Hey, I'm Sara Stevick. I am the founder and creative director of Teaching a Path to L&D. If you haven't had a chance and you are a teacher, just somebody looking for some support, resources, a good chat, just a place to ask questions in a safe environment, we are on LinkedIn as well. Would love to have you. Hey, Kara, welcome. All the party people. If you also have a chance, you can always check out our website or our YouTube channel. And so again, that's teachlearndev.org. And so what we aim to do at TPLD is really just bring opportunities for free, help provide non-biased information as much as possible. Let's be real. Okay. There's always going to be a little bias, but we neither encourage nor discourage the purchase of any program or resource. We just highly encourage doing research. So with that being said, hi, I'm Sara Stevick. It's nice to meet you. A little bit of background about me: as a teacher for 9 years. As we all know, that first disarming statement, well, I loved being a teacher. And I did. Don't let me lie. I did love being a teacher. I was the one that got there at 6 a.m, left at 9 o'clock at night. And it just got to a point, I mean, how many of you can relate, where it's, gosh, you're a teacher and you're a security guard and you're a counselor and you're somehow also the general store and, right? And you can only give so much, right? And how do you fill your cup? So that's part of the reason why I do what I do. I've been very fortunate to have a lot of excellent people help me along the way. And so we just like to give that back. And it's all for free. There will never be anything from TPLD that is ever sold, now, past, future. If yes, Kara, if it's for free, it's for me. Yes. By the way, there's some amazing speakers here today, plus over the course of the week. Hopefully you guys had a chance to check out a couple of those. I know Kara's speaking, Kayleen Holt, like Louise mentioned. Please, please, please check it all out. Even if you're checking out the recordings, there's something to be learned from everyone. And that's where we're going to start today with our core competencies. We're going to go over a couple of different ones. We're going to talk about where I picked these up from. And then we're going to talk about how to develop those as a teacher a little bit. But what you'll notice about L&D in general, which is learning and development, for those of you who are a little bit newer, L&D or learning and development is the umbrella in which all of the learning and development roles, such as instructional designer, corporate trainer, content developer, alphabet soup, all of that gets just kind of thrown under the L&D umbrella. So what's beautiful about that is that there's so many different perspectives. But on the flip side of that, that can make it a little confusing, right? Like, I mean, raise your hand if you've ever been confused. You're like, what are these titles? They all sound the same. Like, this sounds like it's describing teaching, but then I'm told I don't have experience. But I feel like, and then people tell me I do have experience, and you're like, what is happening? That's okay. That's completely normal to feel that. And you know what? There is no one correct answer. So that's why I highly, highly encourage everyone who's here today, just go out and listen to a whole bunch of people. Do your research, do your due diligence, see what their backgrounds are, what is going to be their primary source of evidence supporting their claims. That's always going to be so important, because I do want to preface this. You'll get a lot of people up there telling you the do's and don'ts, but are their claims truly valid? Do they feel right? Dig in a little deeper. It's okay to question. And you know what? That's rule number 1 of instructional design. Is question, 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 question. Always question. Because you know what they say about assuming. Huh? No, I'm not kidding, actually. That's kind of sad. Yes, how do they make their money? Very, very true. If they make their money from you, be thinking about that. Be thinking about their motivations. Does that mean that their content is bad? No, not necessarily. Does it mean their content is good? No, not necessarily. Look up different reviews. Make sure that you're vetting your sources. And before financially investing, ask yourself why. Why are you financially investing? What is it you want to get out of it? If the answer is to, add something to your resume, to each their own. But to me, that's not going to get you the most bang for your buck. Your intention should be to learn something and to change a behavior. And that's what learning and development is really all about, is changing a behavior. They cannot guarantee your job. They cannot guarantee you a salary. The only person who can do that really is you. Okay? Knowledge is only ever as good as it's applied. So please keep that in mind as we go over the competencies we talk about today. What does it mean to be competent in something? That's going to look different from job to job. Which competencies that are being focused on also going to look different from job to job. And it's okay if not all of those are a fit for you. If we're going through some of these things and you're like, I don't really like that. Hey, it's just as important to know what you like as it is to know what you don't like and what you don't want to do. Okay. So yes, Kara North does have a wonderful video out there. Kara, would you mind coming off or coming up on stage real quick and just kind of telling us the name of that? No? Wait, no, you don't mind, or no, you don't want to come up, or Aw. Well, would you mind putting the link to the video for in the chat, please? For how you can tell if you should go through a program. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. So now, what does it mean to be an instructional designer? So how many of you have really wondered, what does it mean to be an instructional designer? Or are currently still wondering it? Do we have a lot of people like that? If so, can I get some like thumbs up, some party hats? If anybody wants to know that. Okay, so we got a few. Instructional design means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So what I highly encourage whenever you look at a job description, read the details of it. Don't focus so much on the title itself. You know you're ready to apply for a job when you read the job description. You say, I know exactly what that is, and I can speak to it, and I have examples that I could provide. So that's how you kind of know when you're ready to start applying. Another really great thing I wanted to talk about is the confidence in applying, right? When we think about, geez, I don't know if I have the skills for this. I don't know if I should be applying for this job. Or maybe you are the opposite and you're like, well, I'm a teacher and I have all these skills. Why won't they hire me? Right? Really thinking about what are they asking for in the job description and making sure you're tailoring what you're highlighting to match what they're looking for. Okay? It's very, very, very challenging to go in and say, I'm a teacher, but I could do all these things, versus here's all the things I could do, and here's how it aligns to your company. Here are the things that I really want to highlight that I can do. Plus, I can do all these things if they ask. If they don't ask, it might not be relevant at that time. And that's one of the core competencies of being an instructional designer, is being able to filter through information and provide the most relevant, pertinent information to the job at hand. So if you're going in and you have a lot of broad experience, but it's not necessarily narrowed down to just the competencies and the skills that they're looking for, yeah, you can add in some supplemental things, but it should all tie back to what they're looking for. That's going to be a little bit of an indicator already that, hey, maybe this individual isn't really sure what an instructional designer does, and maybe hasn't taken enough time to really sort out the differences. So really make sure you're doing your due diligence. It's not that there's not transferable skills, because there's a bunch of them, but then there's a bunch of adjacent skills, and then there's a whole bunch of nuanced new skills. Okay. Before we get going, any questions about what we've talked about so far? Feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, drop it in the chat. Going once, twice. Why am I so awesome? Because I've had awesome people like you, helping me along the way. That's a really big thing about L&D. Find the cheerleaders, find the happy people, find the people who are willing to help just to help. I think, what was it, Mr. Rogers said it best, find the helpers, right? So, always make sure there's really wonderfully talented people out there. Everybody speaking at today's event is wonderfully talented, and all the days of this event. Credible resources, really strong in their knowledge base. But it's always okay to question. Even what I tell you today, please, please, please question. Okay. Okay, so from Joy, it's hard for me to determine if I'm looking for general ID or e-learning development. I like both. Okay. I love this question. And that's because I really love ice cream. And you're like, Sarah, why are we talking about ice cream? The reason we're talking about ice cream is because I'm non-discriminatory when it comes to ice cream. I could eat any flavor, but I have to pick what flavor I want to eat, or else I'm going to get a stomach ache. Just because you have a lot of passion in one space doesn't mean that the next time you can't have passion in a slightly different space. There's a lot of overlap. I would really encourage you to think about what the job description is describing and ask yourself, okay, these are my likes, these are my dislikes. Does this job description align with those? And if so, then maybe that's the job for you. Whether it says e-learning developer at the top, instructional designer at the top, doesn't matter, right? Right? Ice cream. Oh, ice cream. Sorry. I digress. But yes, ice cream. So really think about, well, I like this, and I like that, and I like this, and I like that. It's okay to like all those things, but you have to narrow it down to what is it that you want? How long, that can be dependent, right? That, I started off in instructional design. I went to quote unquote learning experience design in my mind. I know. Don't hate me. Don't come at me, haters. In my mind, if you're a really good instructional designer, you're doing learning experience design anyway. But I know there's different camps. Fully support that. I get that. But definitely then went to learning technology. And now I'm really enjoying learning strategy. So just because you pick one thing doesn't mean that you're married to that one thing. So that's why core competencies are going to be really important. So I want to start off by sharing a really, really, really great resource with everyone. I'm going to share my screen here in a second. I did not write this resource. I wish I could take credit for this brilliance. But these are this research paper. Oh, hold on. Let's see. Share screen. Crossing fingers, it's the right screen. Okay, happy day. So there is a lot of wonderful information in this whole research paper about competencies in instructional designers. But starting on page 45, what it does is it compares across a bunch of different, it uses the Addy model and phases in order to break down the different competencies from really high learning organizations that have wonderful research-backed depictions of what it means to be an instructional designer. Now, this is a lot of competencies. It goes and goes and goes and goes, right? If you haven't heard of these learning organizations, definitely look them up. You'll want to know about them. You might even want to join them because you're going to gain a lot of professional community. You're going to gain a lot of professional knowledge. The link is in the chat. Thank you, Luis, for dropping that in there. And what I like about this paper, and keep in mind, this was written in 2016. What I like about this paper is it compares across. And why I like that is because it depends who you ask. And from job to job to job, what competencies they're going to be focused in on are really going to depend on the type of job, the type of person they're looking to fill the role, and even as much so as how much that the organization or the entity posting the job understands about L&D. And so even if you have a job description where you're like, this is perfect, this is what I want, you want to confirm those things within the interview. And the reason I say that is because oftentimes L&D roles are, may or may not be copied and pasted from other organizations. They're like, oh yeah, this sounds like what I want. And then you get in the job and it is actually completely different. So make sure an interview is a two-way street, okay? It's so important that you take a look at, okay, this is what it's stating. This is what I said I can do. And then you verify that in the interview, what they're selling is actually what would be signing on for. Okay. So, like I said, I know this is a lot, so I actually broke it down a little bit differently. And this is available. I'm happy to share this out. Anybody can view it. This is actually part of TPLD, the volunteer organization that I run, or Teaching a Path to L&D. We used a core competency I pulled out from this resource here, a bunch of different core competencies that saw a lot of trends in. So I went through and found, of course, which ones are kind of standard across the board. I looked at job descriptions and narrowed it down to these categories of analysis, design and development, implementation and evaluation, instructional media and technology, as well as communication and professional competencies. Oftentimes, a lot of new instructional designers or those new to the field, this one sometimes gets a little bit of back burner. And if you really want to be a standout candidate, I highly recommend spending actually quite a bit of attention in the communication and professional competencies area, because business acumen is probably going to be one of the biggest things that I know I didn't have. And it takes time to develop, and it's going to really help you see from a holistic standpoint. Yes, must have. See, if you haven't checked out Kara North's session, you should definitely check it out. It sounds killer. I always learn something new every time I watch one of her webinars or videos. So make sure that you're taking a look at the other ones as well. So business acumen, what does that really mean? It means you understand the business as a whole and how to support what the business is trying to do with what you're doing as an instructional designer. So something that's a really big competency is instructional design is not about designing for you, the designer. There's a lot of cool things that we can do, and we get these big ideas in our head. And it's not that those are bad. It's not. But they're not going to fit every situation. It's a partnership. And so one of the things that, some of the things that translate really, really well from teaching into instructional design are going to be some of the data and analytic components. So assessing a learner's need, really, truly understanding where the gaps are, designing effective instruction for that. Although sometimes as teachers, we can tend to be a little bit highly academic in our language instead of conversational and direct and to the point. So beware that pitfall. Beware that pitfall. And, the actual designing of the instruction is pretty good because, a lot of us as teachers have had to do that. Curriculum design is another strong carryover. Implementation, we know how to facilitate rather well. So writing a facilitator guide, that's like a detailed sub lesson plan that they never seem to follow. And that actually does translate pretty well into instructional design, especially in corporate. So just be aware that they don't read instructions still. They don't. You're like, oh, finally people read my instructions. Oh. I also thought I wouldn't have allergies when I moved to Arizona. That was also not true. And then your facilitators following you're like, oh, they facilitate for a living. They're going to take my materials and they're just going to, get up there and do it exactly how I wrote it. They go rogue. Let me tell you, sometimes they're up there and they just go, and you're like, what is happening right now? Why aren't they reading from the script? So yeah, and Melissa, being long-winded, Hello. So it's okay to be long-winded if you're a presenter or a coach, as long as you're aware that that's something that you're doing. And what I like to do to help with that, typically, is write it out, plan it out, leave it alone for quite a bit of time, come back, sit down, and start doing what they call in English is murdering my dearests. So not everything is going to be important. Not everything is important. And this is huge for instructional design. Okay, this is so big. How do you know if something's important though? And this is something that, in the development of this 10 module course that we're making, it'll be for free. It'll be coming out in November, where we actually simulate the first 3 months on the job for instructional designers, and support that with learning material. But think about your learning objectives. Your learning objectives always need to be rooted in the behaviors that you want to see because they went through training. And if those behaviors do not directly tie back to KPIs, business objectives, KPIs meaning key performance indicators, or OKRs, so objective key results for the business. Why is it in your training? Number one, right? Number two, if you look back at your objectives and what you're teaching about is kind of going, no, reel it in. It's not all important. So always true back to your objectives, which should always true back to the ask for the training that was developed and the business need driving the need for training. If there is not a business need driving a need for training, training is not the answer. If it is not a gap in knowledge, skill, or ability, training is not the answer. We can't help those things. And even if they are, sometimes we have to prioritize how critical is this to the business. Okay. So always, like I said, double check your objectives. Make sure your objectives are aligned with the data that's driving the need for training, and that it's aligned with those KPIs, key performance indicators, or OKRs, right? And that anything that you put in your learning at the end of the day helps them do their job better. Because if it does not help them do their job better, you're wasting time, you're wasting money, and that's a no-no. That's a no-no. Okay. So anyway, going back, those are some things that tend to correlate really well. Instructional media and technology, those are going to be ones that you do want to develop. But even though that these translate well in a general sense, you'll want to make sure you understand the methodologies. Okay. You want to know the history. I always recommend looking up the history of L&D and instructional design because A, it's fascinating. But B, it helps inform where we're going, where we've been, what we want to avoid, and why things happen the way that they happen. So we can't challenge a status quo if we don't know the reasons for doing it in the first place, because we might not need to challenge everything that comes across the plate, right? But oftentimes I see instructional media and technology being highly emphasized. Don't get me wrong. It's important to learn what I like to call comprehensive authoring tools. So these are like Articulate Storyline, Captivate, Genially. But here's the thing. Good instruction is not created because you have skill in a technology. Good instruction comes from sound practice that is rooted in research, is rooted in the neuroscience of how people learn, and deeply, deeply rooted in psychological behavioral tiebacks is going to be so important. Why do people do the things that they do? And if you can understand that and dig into that, then you can create what's called the WIFM, which sounds like a wiffle ball. It is not a wiffle ball. It is the what's in it for me. Because you can have the best e-learning with like all of these really cool, I'm going to throw in some buzzwords just because why not? Gamification and badges and certificates for everyone. You can have all that. It won't matter a lick. Not a lick if you can't create that with them. Because if they don't care, it's just rolling right on off. And then again, what are we wasting? What happens when we go to a training and nothing is taken away if a behavior doesn't change? Why is that a problem? Go ahead and drop it in the chat. Raise your hand. Come off mute. Don't be scared. Time and money. Time and money. And that's right. That's right, Nicole. We don't need no stinking badges. We don't need no stinking badges. Now, don't get me wrong. Understanding motivational factors is going to be really, really important. But beware of the L&D buzzwords. Beware of the L&D buzzwords. Okay? So, good to see you, Jason. I knew you'd like that one. Oh, man. Oh, my Blazing Saddles friends. Okay. So, getting back to it. That is a really long, convoluted way to get to the point that I'm trying to get to, which is there's gonna be some things that don't translate well. And big one of those is as teachers, oftentimes we're alone in our classroom. And they're like, here are the standards, find a way to teach it. And you're like, but I have a question. No questions. Stop it. And you're like, okay, that's okay. I'll figure it out. Don't worry. I got this. Right? And we make it happen. And we'd like whip it up. And it's like the most glorious thing ever. And they come in, they observe, and they're like, okay, was it engaging? Did you hit all the standards? Can they take this test? Because we all know that's a true and accurate measure of how much knowledge was acquired. I'll keep that to myself. I'm trying to keep that to myself. I will succeed. No, I won't. No, I won't. There's a difference between knowledge acquisition and skill acquisition and being tested on how to take a test. And I'll leave it there. Okay. So when we take a look at what doesn't translate in that scenario is as an instructional designer, you're coming in, you have to work with a team. You have a client, you have stakeholders who are like, well, based on how well this goes, that impacts our KPIs and OKRs. So if that doesn't go well, we're losing money. That's a stakeholder, right? And then you have SMEs, your subject matter experts. You might even have other members of your L&D design team. So if you're an instructional designer, you might have a learning consultant. You might have a content developer that helps you. You might be partnering with another instructional designer. And it's going to be so important to ask questions. Because if you don't ask questions, we're going to assume, right? And we all know that when we assume that, you know where that's going. Or I'm going to assume that you know where that's going. It's so easy to assume. And yeah, Cindy, that's so right. Butts and seats, completion and training hours mean absolutely nothing if there's no significant ROI to the business, right? So I'm super excited to see that people are excited to collaborate and be part of a team. But as being part of a team, what that means is that we might have ideas that we need to socialize clearly And we need to do it in a way that is seen as truly collaborative. Oftentimes, ROI, great question. And then I'll come back to the collaborative. ROI is return on investment. That means if I'm going to start putting in money, I better be getting that money back at least twofold, right? I don't want to lose money because I did a training. And that's what business is all about. It should always be about driving performance, driving behavioral change so that our target audience performs better and makes the company more money. That's ROI. Okay. Great question. You're most welcome. So, selling ideas is super important. You have to be able to use we language in a way that's collaborative. Some ways that you probably are already doing this and may not know if you've ever been part of a special ed IEP team. If you've had to work with special educators, if you're in teaching, if you've had to develop curricula for an entire district before, which there's a lot of competing ideas and there's lots of different ways to do things, right? So you might already have some experience with this, but sometimes there's both a blessing and a curse to being a teacher. And that is we like to teach. And when you work with adults and you're working in a collaborative environment, we don't need to teach. We need to work together. And so bringing your ideas from a place of mutual respect to others' ideas and incorporating their ideas into yours, that's where that harmony is really going to come from. And also being willing to accept that sometimes you just got to do what somebody else wants you to do. And that's sometimes a hard thing to swallow. But how can you do something somebody else wants you to do if you don't know what they're asking you to do? Right? So that's one of the key things. Yes, it's a huge adjustment from teaching to working on a corporate team. So when somebody comes to you or a manager and they have the ask of, hey, I want you to make this training. Why is going to be your best friend? That's going to be your best friend question. Can you tell me a little bit more about the need driving this training request? What training has already been done? Why is this a business need right now? What would be the impact if, we did this now versus if we did it later? I just want to understand more. We always want to understand more and more and more, right? So really that's digging in deep to some of these communication and professional competencies. So collaborating with stakeholders, SMEs, clients, learners, and other key professionals to maximize design outputs and learning environment. I can't tell you how many times I've had a client come to me, ask for a specific type of training. I want you to make an instructor-led training on this. Now, initially, that can be like, whoa, okay. We have all these resources at our disposal. That seems like archaic, but that's not digging in deep enough. Okay, can you please tell me more about why you feel that the best approach would be instructor-led training here? I would like to understand more about that. Sometimes it actually turns out, and we figure this out through, if you don't know Kathy Moore's action mapping, she has this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful article called How to Do an Intake Meeting While Avoiding an Info Dump. Excellent. That way you can get there together. But really, really, really thinking about digging in deep to why are we doing this? Tell me more about why this is the direction that we're headed. Let me take that back, do more research on it, make sure that we have the right approach given how much time and resources we have. Maybe it's instructor led because maybe we don't have enough. I know sounds interesting, but maybe we don't have enough computers, or maybe the bandwidth for, out maybe you're doing like electricians or whatever, and they're out in the fields and they don't have very much, internet out there. And so it has to be instructor led. By just assuming that one way over another is going to be best without understanding the whole impact of your capacity, your time, your resources, what your learner's capacity is, what the business is willing to spend on, all these different things. That's where that pitfall of assuming can really dig in deep. And when you push for your ideas without understanding this first, it might rub people the wrong way. I'm just going to be real frank about that. Have I rubbed people the wrong way when I first started instructional designing? Yes. Am I proud of that? No. Did I learn a lot from that? Yes. Yes, I did. I was very fortunate that my first instructional design position was with a very understanding group of individuals who are very highly collaborative, and they helped me get to that place. So would I do things differently now? Are you going to make mistakes? Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah. But only if you're willing to admit that you made the mistakes, and only if you're willing to learn from them. And that's another huge pitfall in competencies that we want to understand. So when we look at these competencies along the communication professionals category, developing and leveraging rapport and influence in professional relationships, it's going to be huge. And part of that is listening to others and not always coming in as the expert. In fact, come in pretending you're just want to learn more. You want to, and not pretending, actually wanting to learn more. Be open to others' ideas, because you never know when your next great one's coming. I love the conversation in the chat right now, and I did want to take a minute to kind of talk about that. Why is an intake meeting 2 hours long? I agree that it should be a lengthy conversation, but it should only be a lengthy conversation if everybody is going into it knowing what to expect. One of the rookie mistakes I know I did was I set up some of these intake meetings without having a very concrete agenda. I didn't have those questions communicated ahead of time to say, okay, this is how we're going to be divvying up. If you're going to be asking for 2 hours of someone's time, you better have that time well planned out. And that will help the resistance to the 2 hours. And everything that an instructional designer has to do, you gotta create the WIFM. Tell them why you need 2 hours. Tell them how this will impact the ROI. How will this make them money by giving 2 out? By giving me 2 hours of your time now, will avoid, having to come back and maybe meet again later on, so that I can collect as much information during this session so that we can work very harmoniously from the get, and I can create exactly what it is you're looking for. Right? So again, Kathy Moore does talk about that in that one. Oh, I see somebody dropped it. Joy, thank you for putting that in there. So yes. Okay. Now, so questions are really the root of everything. I have seen, and I have done, oh, it hurts to say, but it's good to say, because we have to put ourselves out there for our own learning, to help others learn. And we do that through mistakes. And I've made I've made mistakes. So asking questions and assuming are probably two of the biggest pitfalls. And then trying to teach and come in as an expert versus a collaborator, those are going to hinder your ability to really explain key theories and principles in instructional design in a way that develops and leverages rapport and influence that shows you understand the business acumen and processes to inform. All of these are interconnected. And that's part of developing business acumen, is understanding how they are connected. Okay. So I know I said a lot. Questions, any thoughts? Would love to hear some other voices other than mine. I know I can drone. I feel like that, in the Peanuts and wah, 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 So feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to come on up. Ask in the chat. Okay, are these competencies from a standard? What do each of the columns mean? Oh, great question. So I pulled all the competencies from Wade Kelly's dissertation. It's from 2016. We'll go ahead and drop that into the chat once more. There we go. And starting on page 45 going through, and these are from professional learning organizations that have developed core competencies. Some are going to be newer than others. So what I really like about this paper is it kind of compares across, because it's not all going to be the same throughout. So what I kind of did is I went through and I found commonalities across the different columns and put them into this template here, into a little bit. So it's very similar to the categories that they have. Sorry, clicking around here. So the Addy Phases. So Addy, if you haven't had a moment to take a look at instructional design models such as Addy, SAM, backwards design, a lot of these are going to sound very familiar. These are going to be theory, and there is a blend. So make sure that, you take the theory and figure out what that looks like in practice. But so I took those and put them into this. You will also see that there's an average criticality rating. And so basically what we did for TPLD is that we wanted to create a simulated 3-month experience. Well, how long it takes is really dependent on the individual going through it, but simulate the first 3 months on the instructional design job, where you actually get a prompt in your first assignment, and you get to actually pretend you're working for a fictitious company, and supplement that with learning based on the core competencies we derived from here. So in order to do that, we had to do our needs analysis first. And so we sent out a survey, which was, in retrospect, very, very long, but live and learn, that asked current teachers who are moving into instructional design, also another group of former teachers who are currently working in instructional design, and then hiring managers. So these criticality ratings come from the raw data, which is summarized in the summarized data. So you can click and access them from there. But you can see where, these are the hiring manager results. And so they rated the importance of these skills. So while you're looking here, you can see which ones are going to be, were highly emphasized by those learning managers. And then also the perceived gap from learning managers. So if there's a large gap between the learning managers and the former teachers who are currently working in it, that means that we might not be doing a really good job of communicating how we as teachers did that in our role. Luckily, there wasn't a lot of large gaps. There are a few, but so that's where these were derived from. So great question. Okay, sorry, there's a little red dot that I have to keep pushing to see all the chats. What if the company already has a ticket system for the more minor L&D needs, making asking those why questions more difficult to get answered? So I actually experienced something very similar to this in one of my recent roles. And you can always ask why. Can you change it for that project? Maybe, maybe not. But what you can do is take that up through the chain. You can escalate, right, through your L&D manager and say, you know, I want to understand more about the actual business need driving this training. Okay. And again, it's finding the right person to ask those questions to. And if another instructional designer is doing the intake and you want to understand more, maybe you have to work with that instructional designer as your go-between. But this was actually something that I was working to change a little bit in my last position, was that we were getting a lot of what I call chop shop requests, like, oh, make this training. And it's like, why are we making that training? And so that led to eventually taking a look at our intake format and making it more tailored to the information we actually needed to know. So we had some opportunities in our intake form. So if you're noticing gaps in your business processes, that's where these communication and professional competencies and understanding how the business works, it's going to come in really handy, because you're going to have to start, identifying gaps not only in learning, but also kind of in areas of making work more efficient for the designers. So I hope that helps. Let's see. Sorry, I just hit the red button. It seems like this thing is interesting here. How do we balance including competencies in our resume and in the interview process? Are the ones in the job description more important to focus on from the outset? I would say yes. However, you do not need to write a resume for every job description. If you did that, you would have no time in the day. You would hate writing resumes even more than we probably already hate writing resumes. But what I will say is, you're not writing a teacher resume. This is really, really, really important. Okay. Because in a teacher resume, you might kind of gloss over the fact that you actually did the analysis component in order to design and then develop the learning materials, because that's not the emphasis in teaching. It's a small part of teaching. Whereas in instructional design, that is a large, large, large part. So really take a look at a bunch of different job descriptions that you have interest in and highlight the ones that you notice trending, right? Oh, I've seen this in every single one. I need to write a bullet point about that. Say what you did, how you did it, and what were the results. This can be qualitative or quantitative. If you don't have quantitative, make sure it's qualitative. You want to put in the result. Why does this matter to the business? Also thinking about what you want to highlight depending on the needs of the business, right? So really great question. Okay, let's see. Any other questions? I know we're coming up on time. I have a question for everybody in the audience. What is a key takeaway that you took away from today that is either different from teaching to instructional design, or things that you might want to start like looking at? Also, while you guys are putting those into the chat, in the 3 minutes I've left, how do you develop these skills, right? So we talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but there are different ways to develop instructional design skills. You do not have to get an additional degree in order to become an instructional designer. You do not have to go through a formal program. However, you do have to put in about as much work as you would for a formal program. So, some individuals are really fine with learning on their own. That's what I did. I use LinkedIn Learning. You can get that for a month free through LinkedIn. And then it's $30 a month, I think. Again, TPLD neither encourages nor discourages the purchase of any program. We just highly encourage you to do your research. You can do this through one of the academies or boot camps. Again, please make sure that you're pursuing these for the right reasons, which is to develop your skill set and not to add to your resume. And make sure you know what you're buying. Make sure you know what you're buying. If you're just after a really great community that can help you out, hey, TPLD has got you covered. We answer any questions that you want. We have a wonderful, wonderful community over there. Allison Solars is our VP currently, and she has been doing an amazing job over there, helping to just keep everything up and running while the rest of TPLD kind of works on this huge, and Allison's actually part of that too, which is amazing. She does great work. But we're actually developing a full 10 course curricula to cover all of these core competencies. That's what we've been doing. So you can do that, and that will be available for free. It will be for free for anyone who wants to go through it. And it will be research-based. We do ask for feedback. It'll be iterated on. If you want to get involved in the project as we go through we're not taking on volunteers right now, but we will be going through another iteration. So we get to see all the different levels of LTEM or Kirkpatrick's, if you're familiar with the different evaluation models. So that's definitely an option. You can also go do things like today, do things that you can go and see webinars. Join mygldc.com. They have meetups every week. They do have a paid version. And again, the disclaimer. But, all their stuff is really good. Also, L&D Cares is a wonderful nonprofit organization that helps anybody who wants to get into this space. So, tons of different ways to learn. Brush up on your graphic design. As important as it doesn't feel like it is, it really is. Because poor graphic design and instructional design at the corporate level is very distracting to content. So how do you do that? You can look at, Canva, look at it for inspiration, then work to recreate those things so that you get a feel for the layout. If you can find a template on it out in the real world, that is not design, that's curation. That is different. Please know that there is a difference. So yes. Well, that is my time. I'm sorry I went over a minute. I hope I don't get in trouble. I really hope this was helpful. Happy to answer any questions. Connect on LinkedIn. Probably going to go hang out in the lounge. Is there the lounge option, Luis?
There is the lounge
can't hear you,
option.
my friend.
Is
it on?
yeah. Let's see who is going next. Let's see. I've got Lainey Istvan from ID Lens. She's doing a table with personal stories transitioning to L&D. Then 10 o'clock, Ricky Fisher, who's had a really popular table so far.
As he should. He's fantastic.
Yes. I hear Ricky is a rock star. Portfolios is what he's discussing. And of course, I want to mention the next session today. with Matt Vosmick, Cultures of L&D, How Do We Do Things Here? He is really taking the perspective of kind of the business side. So I think that Sara, you had talked a little bit about this earlier in your session, so that'll be a really, really good one to attend. And then Devin Torres is closing out the day at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 Eastern, about imposter syndrome. So I would check that one out too, because Devin is absolutely fantastic. And Sara, you are incredible. Look at you making this huge impact on the world.
Oh, thank you. It's because, why not? We all got to help each other. That's the
Yeah.
best way, honestly, to help get further along in the field and learn. Ask what you can do for others.
I
Really
love
ask
it.
what you can do for others.
Yeah, it's great. And even like Cindy Nagel is in chat, and she is like I think a 20-year veteran of L&D, and she's in here enjoying your session. So
Oh, thank you
so
so much. I'm
yeah.
very honored by all the people that were joining, and I love that y'all kept the chat lively, and
Mhm.
yeah, just keep going out there and questioning and learning. And you know what? None of us are masters at any of it, so let's all just learn from each other.
Yeah, yeah. And just so everyone knows, TLDC, which is who's hosting this event, we have regular conversations every week. I try to have at least one broadcast, a free broadcast a week, so that we just keep, things active and activated within our minds, and just learning to get better. And in fact, I'm planning a graphic design for instructional design event. Hopefully next month. I'm just sort of talking to speakers now. So it kind of depends. Since this event was so big, I have to make sure that I can host another
You
one
can
next
have a
month.
little recovery time, yeah.
Yeah, well, no, I actually hit a cap on this platform, and so if I hit this cap, I have to wait for another 30 days before I can actually throw another event. That's why the free ticket thing is kind of a limiting thing, because I'm like, oh, I wanted to have that event next month, but if I have too many people, oh well, we'll figure it out. Yeah, Sara, thank you.
No,
Incredible.
thank
I
you.
just it was such a great session. I think that it's definitely the highlight of this event. So
Oh,
um,
thank you.
yeah, really appreciate you. Let's see. Does everyone have the URL for teachlearndev.org? Make sure you go there, join, do everything, bookmark that, because that is an incredible resource. And don't forget, I'll have all the resources that I can in the resource hub right after we close things out. And with that, we'll see everybody in the lounge.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.